So the next thing we're actually going to talk about is fear of rejection and how we could actually experience various unhelpful thoughts or unhelpful thinking styles which exacerbate this fear or terror of rejection. So the first one is catastrophizing. So just need to click a few more times. In the meanwhile, I've just seen okay, so I've just seen an answer to the previous question. So
would you like me to read it out?
Yes, please, Delia.
Okay. I think it compounds the longer it goes on. It just affects your self-confidence and self-worth. You just think about it non-stop, which means you get to something distractions. Running, drawing, which is actually great, as I've joined groups and met people and realized there is more to life and me as a person than career or work.
Most definitely. So again, it does definitely impact your self-confidence and your self-worth, because it's just, I guess, impacting how you view yourself. That terror of rejection definitely does play a big role, because it starts making you question yourself. It starts making you question where you stand in society, where you stand even in the world. It just makes you question everything about yourself, your skills, your experiences, your attributes, your personality. So I definitely understand why it's terror instead of fear of rejection. So thank you for sharing. So actually relating to that point, we are actually talking about some unhelpful thinking styles. The first one is catastrophizing. So thinking that the worst case scenario will happen. So an example here is possibly thinking, I will never be able to get a job. And sometimes we find ourselves experiencing these unhelpful thoughts because of, again, that fear of rejection, because of maybe that negative or stressful experience that we've had. So the next unhelpful thinking style is comparison. So this is when we tend to compare our negative attributes to others' positive attributes. So an example here, everyone else seems to be successful and have a job. However, I am a failure. And again, it's just thinking, and I remember one of you mentioned as well, that there's all these other people who have been getting support from their companies, yet you feel that you haven't been given that support or sympathy. And again, it's comparing your negative place to possibly someone else's time in their lives, or maybe they're experiencing a positive thing. And it's really, really normal to feel or to compare ourselves to others. Sometimes we could be walking in the street and we see someone who possibly looks super successful. Maybe they have their work attire on and you could see them on a business call on the phone with their folders in their hand, and you just think, yeah, so they clearly are really successful in their lives, and then there's me. So it's just really important, again, to just be aware of these unhelpful thoughts that you may possibly have or that may cross your mind from time to time. So the next unhelpful thinking style is negative filter. So this is when we tend to only notice the negatives in a situation. So an example here is, I am completely incapable of ever getting a job. So constantly only seeing the negatives of this. So one person actually identified a positive of their situation. So they said that they realized that there's more to life because they've met, they've met new people, they've joined groups instead of just being someone who's a career person. And, that's definitely the opposite of a negative filter. So identifying the positives of a situation. But sometimes it's not so easy to find the positives of a situation. Sometimes we may find ourselves only seeing the negatives, such as thinking about, I'm not going to be able to pay the rent or the mortgage or my bills, or I'm not going to be able to see my friends again because I won't be able to afford it. Just thinking of yourself and thinking, well, I've been fired or I've lost my job, so therefore I'm a failure or I don't have the skills. So only seeing the negatives and not focusing on the positives. And the final one is emotional reasoning. So this is when you allow your feelings to determine how you judge a situation. So if we feel, especially if we've been rejected many times, or so whether that be through applying for jobs and being rejected, whether that's through losing a job, whether that's through being furloughed, all of these things can make us feel quite, I guess, quite negative feelings, whether that's stress, whether that's anger, whether that's frustration or annoyance. All of these difficult or negative feelings can make you judge a situation more negatively. So an example here is, I feel stressed and inept, therefore I know I will always remain unemployed. So already you can see in this example where one's feelings directly influence their outlook on their situation, how they've judged the situation. And how you judge a situation definitely does impact your behaviors. And this leads to the next slide. So we may find ourselves stuck inside this vicious cycle. So we may find ourselves where we're experiencing all these unhelpful thoughts. And the ones listed were just a few of many different unhelpful thinking styles we may be experiencing. But thinking to yourself, I'm not talented or skilled enough, nothing will ever be better, or I can't cope with this change, or even comparing yourself to others. All of these negative thoughts breed negative emotions. They cause you to experience really difficult negative emotions, such as being frustrated, low self-esteem, being worried, being annoyed, etc. And all of these negative feelings that we may harbor within us as a result of those negative thoughts may lead us to carry out behaviors that are not so helpful to the situation. So we may actually find ourselves neglecting our own well-being. So just thinking, well, if I've lost a job and I'm terrible at this, then what's the point in me taking care of myself? Or the stress response being activated, or we lose motivation and don't bother applying for other jobs. And before we move on, I just want to ask you all, if you relate to this, and if you have experienced any of those unhelpful thinking styles that I mentioned before. So if you please go to the previous slide so everyone could see the unhelpful thinking styles, and just feel free to write in the comment or the chat box if you have experienced any of those, and if you relate to that vicious cycle at all.
Somebody has replied, yes, I can relate to all of those. So all of those feelings, thoughts.
Most definitely. So it's really easy to feel that you experience all of those different things. So we may find ourselves experiencing a whole bunch of different unhelpful thoughts. So I guess it's just being able to identify those and knowing when you do experience them. Because sometimes we may actually have those thoughts without realizing that, oh, this is catastrophizing, or this is a negative filter.
Somebody has actually said catastrophizing, never get a job, become homeless, life total breakdown.
Most definitely. So thinking of the worst possible case scenario. So just thinking that because I don't have a job, that means I can't pay any bills, that means I'm going to lose the house, and that means I'm homeless, and therefore nothing will ever work again. And thank you so much for sharing, because that's definitely a really difficult thought to experience and to have. So the fact that you are actually aware of this, and the fact that you've been able to highlight that it is the unhelpful thinking style of catastrophizing, is really important, because now that you have that awareness, hopefully the next few slides will really help you out a lot more. Okay, so if we could please go on to the slide after this one. So because of all of these unhelpful thinking styles, we may find ourselves have our motivation hugely impacted. So if we experience all of these negative thoughts, which again harbor those negative feelings, we can directly lose motivation. Now, if we lose motivation, it's actually really interesting, because a lot of the time motivation is actually a lot more important than ability in enabling us to reach our potential and to determine our achievement. So if we don't have the motivation, although we have the ability to be able to, for example, be able to settle into a new sector or apply for a new job or take care of our well-being, even though we have that ability, if we are constantly thinking all of these negative thoughts and experience all these negative feelings, if we lose motivation, that ability wouldn't matter, because we don't have the motivation to push ourselves and help ourselves during those difficult or stressful times. So that's why it's really important to make sure that we can maintain that motivation. Our motivation levels are really important. So I guess one of the main questions I have for everyone is, what makes you lose motivation? And again, please feel free to write in the chat box, and please just write what you're comfortable with.
Okay, we have one comment, depression and hopelessness. We have another one, not getting any results from the work I'm putting in. And then we have one more, rejection, the more and longer it goes on, other negative people and their thoughts. And one more, the media reporting negative news the whole time. I think we're just getting bombarded by the media. There's just one more, lack of time, pressure, lack of urgency, sense of drift.
Most definitely, and these are all really interesting. So the fact that a lot of these things, a lot of what you have highlighted are those feelings of negativity. So feelings of hopelessness, depression, rejection, having negative people and their thoughts, all of these different things, not getting any results from the work you're putting in. So all of these things, and also being surrounded by all that negative news, all of these things are all negative. These negative things and these, I guess, negative environments harbor and facilitate you to think more negatively. They encourage you to think more negatively. And as a result, they could also make you experience more negative emotions. And, you know, again, this is linking to how all of these unhelpful thinking styles, these negative feelings, viewing ourselves badly because of the situation we find ourselves in, all of these things can make us lose motivation. And as a result, we may find ourselves stuck in a place where we feel we can't get out of.
We have a couple of more comments here, constantly coming up against new hurdles. Another one, sense of when will this all stop? Question mark. Another one, even TV commercials are all about life insurance, funeral costs and disasters.
Most definitely. So again, that sense of being surrounded by so much negativity. Also, someone mentioned earlier that lack of time pressure, lack of urgency and sense of drift. So sometimes we may feel that actually having a timeline of some sort or a deadline to meet really helps us to stay motivated, because it gives us that just enough pressure, but not too much, to actually push us to carry on working or carry on striving towards what we want to achieve. And also that feeling of, you know, constantly coming up against new hurdles, not knowing when it would stop, feeling that everything is so negative, and sometimes when we feel something is going right, then suddenly this hurdle comes along that's so negative, and we're just like, we feel like we're taken aback again. So all of these different feelings are really understandable, as well as these thoughts. So thank you so much for sharing. And the reason why we actually talk about this is because motivation is really, really important, because motivation is what is going to help us not only live by our values, and which guide us through life, but having that motivation helps you to take care of your well-being, and it helps you then to better deal with this difficult or stressful time that you may find yourself in. So if we can go to the next slide, please.